Hi, my name is Ella McCrystal. Welcome to The New Mind. Now, today's guest is Jaxon Feeley. Jax is going to tell us all about himself, and we're going to talk all about Jax's experiences today. Now, even if you can't relate to elements of his story, you're going to know that there's parts of this story that really do resonate with you and your life. So please do listen and take a lot from this episode. Welcome, Jax.
Thank you very much.
So, Jax, I'm going to let you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we're just going to explore your experiences and we'll see where it takes us.
Yeah.
So, how would you like to introduce yourself today? Where would you like to start?
Well, obviously, my name is Jaxon Feeley. I am a 29-year-old prison officer, and I am about 2.5 years into transitioning from female to male. And I now work towards helping people find and live their own truth, whatever that might mean to them.
So, today, when we talk about your experiences, I think the most important thing for me with this podcast being about the mind and the body and the soul, and actually more about the brain, the body, and the soul, but obviously that incorporates the mind. One of the things that I want the listeners to get from this is, you know, your strength, your resilience, the experiences that you've had that, although you have had that trans experience, are actually relatable for most of us, I think, because I'm sure within the story, and we're going to find out a lot more about that today, there's going to have been lots of hurdles that you've had to overcome, lots of traumas that I think most of us are going to be able to relate to. Even like I said at the beginning, the story is different, but the traumas, you know, that we all experience as human beings and what we've got to transition through, I think there's something relatable there. So you say it's been 2.5 years. I just want to go back a little bit, and I know we don't want to hyper focus on the trans issue really, but tell me about the decision, just the beginnings of that decision, and more importantly, that kind of decision when you make that decision as a prison officer, because that adds a bit of a different flavour to the story.
I certainly never thought that I would be able to walk back into a prison. That was one thing. But it's difficult when people ask me to talk about the decision, because it's kind of like the most common question I ever get when I have these conversations is, you know, how did you know, or have you always known? And there's kind of two answers to the question, because although I only started to think about and accept that I needed to transition at approximately sort of 26 years old. But when I look back now at Jess as a little girl, you know, from the ages of 4 and 5, I absolutely knew. I just didn't have the vocabulary to verbalize how I was feeling, because there wasn't the visibility that there is now. And you know, that's what I'm working towards, becoming the visibility that I needed so much, because I can see Jess growing up and all the decisions I made, and the, you know, the crazy things that I would do or think about, and the crippling anxiety and everything that I experienced for 26 years. 100% that was why.
Are there any common aspects of that that you've discovered since? Because I know everyone's an individual in their own right. The reason I ask that is because obviously if anyone's listening or knows anyone, they've got a similar experience to be able to cultivate a healthy narrative around that. So at 5 or 6, you know, I would say for me, I definitely had no question. So I suppose it's a similar answer, isn't it? Is that you definitely knew there was some kind of thought process.
I definitely knew there was something. I just didn't know what it was. So I can explain it as, you know, there was always an element of anxiety. And my mum describes it as well as there was a lot of anxiety there as a child, and a big feeling of uncomfortable. The sense of belonging within myself wasn't there. So although I was a really happy, bubbly child, you know, I had the most amazing childhood, the most amazing support system and family, there was something not quite right about me. And it was like I was always searching for something, but I couldn't find it, you know. And I'd make decisions like, you know, at 14, I decided I needed to move school.
Yes.
And there was no reason for me to move school. You know, I was happy in my school. I was playing sport. I had friends. There was not a problem. But for me, it would just come over me that that's what needed to happen, and I'd spend months convincing my mum and dad, and eventually they let me move. And 2 months later, I wanted to go back because I just had this feeling of I just need to go and start again and be the real me.
Wow.
I did not know what that was. I
Mm.
just needed to go and be the real me. And when I realised that when I moved school, everything's still exactly the same, I wanted to go back because then I'd just walked away from my whole support system. And I did that throughout, you know, just making these spontaneous decisions that I was constantly trying to fill a void. You know, I'll buy a car, that'll fill it. I'll buy a house, that'll keep me
Yeah.
happy for 6 months. I'll change jobs, that'll keep me happy. I'll stop that relationship. I'll change friendship group. You know, it was a constant, I'm trying to fill this void. And it was from being very, very young.
So would you say you were filling a void or running away from who you couldn't understand?
I think it was a deep sense of feeling like I needed to be the real me.
Yeah.
I just didn't know what that was.
Yeah.
You know, I was always this tomboy. You know, I wanted the tractor instead of the pram. You know, with all these like stereotypical sort of gender roles. And you know, my mum would put me in a bridesmaid dress and then go mad because at the wedding she'd lift the dress up and I'd have my football shorts on. You know, I was
Amazing.
very like, no, like this is, you know, this is who I am. But I never sort of thought I want to be a boy. Like that wasn't a conscious thought for me. But when I look back now, and I must have done it from being very young to being probably about 25, I used to have these, I used to say these affirmations in my mind, like over and over again. And I wouldn't even know I was doing it. Like I might say it 50 times before I went to bed or, you know, whatever. And I've only really sort of started to think about it recently because I've not done it in a few years. And I used to say, please be okay, everything. I would never change anything. Please don't anything bad happen. And I love being a girl.
Wow.
And I used to do this from being like, honestly, probably about 5 or 6 years old. And I look at it now and I think, oh my God, like you've just spent 20 years trying to convince yourself you was happy being a girl.
So how did I'm really interested in this because of the way that the body, the mind and the soul link. And you know, when we talk about affirmations,
Mm,
I always say to people, let's say, for example, someone says, I want to lose weight.
mm,
I'll always say, don't say, I want to lose weight, because your brain may not believe that you're ready for that
mm,
yet, because you've had this struggle for 20 years to lose weight or whatever. Say, I am working on becoming a healthier, happier version of myself.
mm,
And I'm working on being a slimmer, healthier, happier version of myself, because that's much more relatable for
mm.
your whole system that's got all these stored emotions and memories in the mind body. So when you're saying that to yourself for all those years, was there a sense of anxiety, even like a willingness
Um, a willingness to what? Like,
to create that belief rather
yeah,
than it
like,
being like, I'm happy being a girl? It's
oh no, yeah, it was like, I think it was because I loved who I was.
yeah,
I
wow.
loved the person. I loved the soul. I loved my family. I loved everything. But the image of Jess
Yeah,
did not align with me.
yeah,
And I didn't know that at the time, but I was just crippled with like, this anxiety of something bad's going to happen. Or, you know, I know I love being Jess. I would never change her for anything. I would never change anything for anything. I would never, you know, trying to like go. It was like I was trying to say to like whoever's up there, don't change it because then I'll lose everything.
yeah,
Do you know what I mean? Like this sense of panic. Like
yeah,
I've never dived into it even as much as I'm doing now, but
yeah.
it was just, and I remember, and I used to go over and over and over and over, and you know, in bed or whatever, and it would just keep me up because I'd have to keep saying it, like
Because you
don't change
weren't
a thing,
aligning it.
just in case I woke up in something and you know, I was different, or it was just, it was just a crippling sense of anxiety, and when I look at it now, I just think you was because I tried so hard to be Jess,
Yeah,
like I tried for 27 years to be Jess because I just all I've ever wanted was to make my parents proud. And I thought that, you know, by throwing myself into the things that I was good at, like school or sport or things like that, I thought that making my parents proud would equal my happiness.
yeah. Wow, that's a big one.
And it doesn't.
No.
And that was my goal right up until I made this decision. I'd made every decision. I just wanted to make them proud because I just thought that's the goal in life. because I mustn't have believed that I could have happiness in a different way.
Yeah, because you'd spent your life telling yourself, I
Mm.
am happy as a girl.
Yeah,
So I have to believe that because I've told myself that I've invested in that
yeah.
affirmation, that
Because
has
I
to
didn't
be
want to
true.
change anything else, and it was only when I transitioned that I realised that you have to lose a part of yourself to achieve
Yeah,
a
you
part
do.
of yourself that you need as well.
Yeah, yeah. And on that note, then, because that's quite a powerful statement, have you lost Jess?
Um, there is parts of Jess that I had to say goodbye to, yeah, because as much as someone doesn't die, you have to grieve a person,
Yeah.
and that's for parents, family. Me.
Mm.
I've had to grieve parts of Jess, and there are parts of Jess that I miss. When I first came out as trans, I know we've gone like way forward, but as when I first came out, I was probably in the worst mental state possible because myself included and everyone around me was naive to think you've done it now, you should be happy.
Yeah.
But what happened was I'd I'd come out, so I couldn't hide behind Jess anymore. I'd lost everything that was Jess's identity, which is this ex-military, strong rugby playing lesbian woman, this
Mm.
identity that I'd built up for 26, 27 years. But I didn't know who Jax was yet. And I still looked very much like Jess. I'd just shaved my head. I hadn't started hormones. I still had boobs. I was just in this awful in between stage of feeling like a freak. And I didn't know who I was. I didn't have an identity because I just lost all that in a second.
Yeah.
But it took me a long time to build Jax. And what I've realized is I was never getting rid of Jess. I just couldn't have her be the image. I'm
Yeah.
exactly the same now. It's just natural happiness, and I'm not exhausted from keeping the mask on.
Wow. So,
But yeah, I went way forward then. So if you
no,
want to
no,
go
no,
back,
no. This is probably what it's going to be like the entire conversation, isn't it? Because all of it is actually, I think, so many people hide behind
Mm,
a layer of something they've created.
yeah,
This is why I really wanted this conversation, because yours is a bit more of a physical, well, a lot more of a physical change that's happened, but and a lot more of society's judgment that
mm,
comes with this change. But essentially, most people, in fact, sorry to waffle here, but there's actually a psychotherapy called IFS which I use, which is internal family systems. To keep it simple, it's parts work.
yeah,
So we look at the different parts of a person. So instead of just being like, you are Jax
mm,
and that is it, we'll look at the inner critic, we'll look at the vulnerable parts, we'll look at the protector parts, the
yeah,
parts of you that are creating more problems for yourself. So a protector part, for example, could be a people pleaser,
yeah,
or it could be somebody that's angry.
yeah,
And all these different parts of us are going to come up at different points in our lives, in our day. Typical example is a very happy person who's maybe got some stress at home or whatever, gets into a car and becomes a very angry,
yeah,
stressful person, because all the stress that they're holding in from work or whatever, and presenting the very happy person at home, they get into the car and the angry protector part comes out. So the
mm,
reason I reference that particular part of psychotherapy is, for me, most people have the parts that are the protector parts that are in the front.
mm,
And we don't let people see the vulnerable, exiled parts of us that we're trying to hide because
yeah,
we're worried of being judged and all of that. So a lot of what you're saying there about Jess and Jax are just parts of who you are.
yeah,
But because of society, you've had to declare
yeah,
more obviously, oh, that part's, not there anymore because
yeah,
physically I'm going to change it. But
yeah.
you are still all of those parts that present as who you are now.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like I said to you before, being trans is part of my experience.
Yeah.
I am a man of trans experience. That's not all that I am.
No.
That's not my whole identity. I'm so many other things, and a lot of people attach their identity to what they do as a job, or
Yes.
if they're married, or
Yeah.
where they live, and I'm always thinking, well, no, who are you?
Yeah.
Like I'm Jax. I might be trans, but I'm emotionally intelligent. I'm a bit daft. I'm very northern. I like
You don't like
pies.
olives.
I don't like olives. It's just part of your experience.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love vulnerability, and I live for that. And I work a lot with the prisoners that I work with on that. And I always say to them, you know, if you're not willing to put yourself in a situation for it to go really bad, you're not putting yourself in a situation for it to be absolutely amazing either.
Exactly, because you're numbing out in the middle somewhere.
Yeah, and you're just sitting back and going, well, this is safe and this is comfortable and I don't have to be vulnerable. I don't have to be seen. It can't go wrong. You know, I don't want to go for that interview because they might say no. But what if they say yeah?
Yeah.
You know, what if you do this and it's the best decision? What if you leave that relationship and it's the best decision? What if you take that leap and even if it doesn't work, it doesn't make it a failure because that's what was meant to happen anyway.
That's so interesting, because there you are, having gone through this as a prison officer in a prison with prisoners, helping them to understand themselves.
Yeah.
And on that note, how did that happen at work? Because I understand society is not always kind in these situations. And I know a lot of people that have been in prison. I would say a lot of those people are very, very good people that have got a front. Again, it's, you know, a part that's on display. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your experience with the prisoners, actually.
So I've been a prison officer for about 5.5 years. And I joined the prison service, obviously, as Jess. I spent my first 3 years as a female prison officer. And I was that person, you know, I kept the front on at work and I went home and I was very angry and not okay. And I reached a point where I became... So what happened was I had a conversation with someone. I'm trying to put my thoughts in order, sorry, so I can get to the point. I had a conversation with someone about 3 years into my prison service career and said, I was talking about mental health and I said, yeah, oh, I used to struggle with my mental health, you know, like I did when I was in the military and when I came out and different things. And I said this really blasé, but I said, you know, oh, I used to think that I wanted to be a boy because a couple of years before I'd had a conversation with my mum when I'd come back off tour and I was really struggling with depression and stuff. And I'd made the decision to come out of the military because of that. And I said to her one day, you know, is it because I want to be a boy? Like, is that what's wrong with me? Like, is that what's going on? Like, is that why I'm so depressed? And she said to me in that moment, you know, like, no, you know, you're this beautiful athletic woman, like everyone loves you. That's why, you know, you're so unique. You wouldn't be you if you weren't Jess. You know, she used to call me Miss Congeniality. Like, she, you know, she's like, you're just you. And in that moment, that's what we sort of both believed. And that was the first time I'd ever brought it to the surface or thought about it. And we both kind of just, you know, I pushed it aside at that point. And my mum says now, you know, if I'd have turned around and said, yeah, Jess, you know, you should be a boy, and you'd have gone, oh, my mum says it's all right, I'll do it. And then it was the wrong decision, she would never forgive herself. Like, it had to come from me.
Yes.
And, you know, that's kind of what we both believed in that moment, that it was just a fleeting thought. And then I joined the prison service and that filled a void for 3 years. And then I had this conversation and said, you know, I used to think I wanted to be a man. And I said it in a way that, you know, I've dealt with that. Like, that was just a fleeting thought. I used to struggle with my mental health, and that was one of the things that popped up. And then since I had that conversation, it never went away. And it just stuck at the forefront of my mind. And it was just this thing that was like, I'm here now. You know, I'm not going. And what happened was I sort of delved into the world of YouTube.
Yes.
And went down that hole and found, you know, because I didn't even think it was a thing. I didn't think it was possible. I certainly didn't think I could do it in like a town like Wigan as a prison officer, like never in a million years. But I just thought, I'll just have a look on YouTube. And I went into this hole and found all these trans men, like documenting the journey and changing the bodies and living a life and being models and all these things. And I'm thinking, oh my God. And increasingly over time, I just became really jealous of these men. Like, really jealous of, like, I could be living like that, you know. But in my head, I was thinking, I can never do that. And I spent about a year sort of living vicariously through YouTube and carrying on being a prison officer and just thinking, I could never do that, but I'll live through you.
Did you make any changes,
you know,
though? Like,
yeah, I definitely changed. You know, I had an undercut, you know, and my hair like started to get higher. And I watch over time and I look at it now and I think, oh my God, you know, like what was you doing? And it was obvious that was happening. And my friends see it now and they're like, how did we not know what you were doing? But
was that a test, though? Were you testing people's responses to your appearance changing
I think I
unconsciously?
was just, yeah, maybe, because I could get away with it because I was a gay woman.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like, I'm just kind of embracing the gay a bit more. It was
Yeah.
stereotypically, so to speak. But yeah, so I spent like a year living in YouTube, thinking I'll just live vicariously through YouTube, and that'll keep me happy. I'll never actually do it.
Yeah.
And what happened was I got pulled in by one of my governors, and I hadn't realised this, but as I'd still slowly become more accepting of who I really was, I'd become a really angry prison officer.
Wow.
And because I was just so angry with the world,
Yes.
and I didn't realise it at the time, but I was suicidal. Like I was. A prison is the most dangerous place in the world. Like if you want to start a fight or if you're in a bad place mentally, I was just ready to argue all the time. I used to be a strong, good, like well-respected prison officer who could have that banter, but toe the line. And I was firm but fair, and I had a military background, and I loved it because I could have that. You're everything to a prisoner: mum,
Yeah.
dad, therapist, nurse, fireman, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize it was happening, but I started to put myself in situations where I was putting myself and other people in danger. And, I could be on like the Fours landing having a go at someone for having the flip flops on. And, it's 4 officers to 100 men. Like, no one knew where
Wow.
I was. And
Yeah.
I'm there having an argument ready to fight. I could have been getting my head caved in, but I look at that now and I think, Christ, you were suicidal.
Wow.
Like
Yeah.
you just didn't care.
Yeah.
And I
Did
got,
you feel like you didn't care? Sorry to butt in there. Were you said that you didn't realize it, but was there any conscious thoughts of people say this often with suicidal
mm,
ideations? Oh, if I got hit by a car today, so what? Was there anything like that?
no, I didn't feel like that. Like, because I loved a lot of my life,
Yeah.
and I just didn't know that I
Yeah.
was like this. I always knew that I had an element of anxiety and depression, but I was just angry, and I was just ready for a fight. And I thought I was the only one doing my job right. I thought I was the only one being a good prison officer and stopping it all going to shit. And
Wow.
do you know what I mean? And
Almost sort of in your own world, I guess.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And, I'd always been feisty, but I was like sort of out of control, really. And I got pulled in by my governor Vicky, and we're very good friends now. But at the time, we like really butted heads, and she pulled me in and she said, "I've I've I've had quite a few complaints about you, from staff and prisoners and stuff like this." And I'm thinking, what? Like a year ago, you were telling me how good I was at this job and wanting to do this and that. And she was like, "I've got this one complaint. I want to read it out to you." So this complaint was off like 6 foot bloke, twice the size of me, off the wing that I worked on, and it said, if I could choose between being in a shark tank with a shark or being on the prison landing with Jess Feeley, I'd pick the shark tank every time.
OMG.
And I'm sat there and I'm like, what? Like, are you taking this seriously? Like, I'm one woman. Like, you
Wow.
think I'm terrorizing 90 men? Like, what? I'm the only one doing my job, da 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 da. And I just went mental, like completely lost my rag, stormed out her office, and she takes the piss out of me now. She's like, you took the doors hinges off and blah blah blah. And I was fuming, but I left the office and I went back to the wing. And when I got back, I just completely broke down.
Yeah.
Like I was just done, because I realized at that point that I couldn't do this anymore.
Oh my gosh.
Like I
Yeah.
couldn't keep up this mask. Something has got to give, and it mattered to me as well. I hated the fact that people didn't think I was good at my job anymore, or people didn't. Everything just upset me, and I was just done at that point. I was like, you know what, I can't do this. Like, and it was in that moment where I was like, if I don't do this, I'm not going to be here anymore.
I'm really interested in that bit because I think a lot of this is unconscious behavior that you talk
Mm,
about, because obviously well, I say obviously, but for those people that don't know, 95% of our thinking is subconscious. So we're not conscious of it. And everything you've said there feels like you cultivated a space so that it was impossible
mm,
for you to carry on as Jess. So the anger, if
mm,
not, obviously it was fueled by knowing that you probably were jealous of these guys that you were watching on YouTube. But it feels like you were making it impossible. Like you probably might have lost your job had you have carried on like that. So something was going to change anyway. And if you don't make a decision, you're going to lose everything. So I have to make this decision. Is that ever been a thought before that you unconsciously were creating?
Probably, because I've always said to everyone my entire life, when it feels scary to jump, that's when you jump.
Yes.
Otherwise, you stay in the same place your entire life. You know, I've always been so motivated, like when I was in the military, or when I was playing sport, whatever, all these things in my past. And I've always believed in that. And it had reached a point where I had to take my own advice. And I knew at that point that I didn't want to die, but I didn't want to live anymore. And if I didn't make this decision, I wasn't going to be here. So every decision from that point was, I do this or I die.
I mean, that's powerful, because it was obviously always there at the forefront that this is your kind of mantra. And there you are, being angry, making 6 foot, hunks of men scared of you. And you could lose your job because you are that scary.
Well,
in a prison.
Apparently, yeah. And I decided at that point, I'm going to have to tell my family, I'm going to have to try and do this.
I mean, that's I suppose that answers that question, is like, how did that decision come about? But I've got to say something, because I obviously I invited you on, and so I knew I wanted to just look at some more videos, and I came across your, I think, original
coming out video.
Oh my God.
Oh no, my voice.
But I was crying watching that.
Why?
Because you laughing at me crying at you.
Why did you watch that?
Have I just killed you inside a little bit?
No, it's okay. I just forget it exists sometimes. Like, I can't delete it, but I just forget it exists.
Because it's so powerful, because obviously I've spoken to you since then. You were terrified, yeah. And so I wanted to kind of have a bit of a, because I'm so interested in the brain and the mind and how people operate, I wanted to see the beginning of this journey for you. And obviously you've shown photos of Jess. And Jess, as well as Jax, actually, like, just phenomenal looking human beings. Both ways, phenomenal. Beautiful humans.
Thank you.
And so I'd seen obviously the photos, because you do share, and I wanted to see you at that point, because you've spoken about being anxious and depressed, and I saw the inner child there, like terrified. Absolutely terrified. And I just felt for anyone that has to go through anything like that, where they're facing something. Having been through that myself, by the way, at 11 years old, I had to tell a truth about being sexually abused by my dad. And I always reference a part of the story, which is, when that news had come out, I ran into the toilets at school, because it happened at school when it came out. And I felt, I can't even, I've said a sense of doom and gloom, or a black cloud. You can't even describe that fear, that when you say terrified, unless you've experienced that level of being terrified, you just don't know what it means. So I think I related to all children and all people that have had to do something that has scared them more than anything else ever will. Because nothing.
Oh my God. Like, I would rather be on a plane to Iraq than come out as trans.
And this is someone who's been in the military.
Walk back into a prison.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I say that, like, because I've done it. But, I can't believe you watched that video. No one's ever asked me about that before.
I'm so sorry.
No, don't apologise. It's fine. I just forget that it exists, and
it's powerful though. To be honest, Jax.
Yeah, and I don't talk about it. I don't think a lot of people see it, because it's on like a separate YouTube channel and stuff.
This is because of my curious psychotherapeutic mind.
Yeah. No, but it's good, because I don't talk about it a lot, and that was probably the worst point, in this whole process, because at that point I'd obviously come out to my parents, which was an experience.
Yeah.
And I'd ran off to Brighton. Like,
you disappeared?
I left. Yeah.
Oh wow.
I was off sick from the prison service. I sat my mum and dad down, and my brother and sister, and came out for the second time, and they were all fine when it was gay, 10 years prior, because they saw it come in. And but telling someone that you're going to transition from gender, it's the thing that hits a parent more than anything is fear.
So what was that initial reaction?
So 10 years earlier, when I'd sat down, I was terrified to tell them that I was gay at the time. When I was 20 years old, I was shitting myself then because I didn't know any gay women in Wigan. You know,
Right.
it wasn't, you know, it wasn't something that was very well known. But they all sat down, and my dad just went, "You gay, aren't you?" And I'm like crying my eyes out, like squeezing my sister's hand, you know, like, "Yeah, I'm gay, I'm sorry," you know. And they kind of expected it, and we had, you know, a conversation about it, and you know, that was all fine, and they embraced it. Um, and then obviously I sat them down again to sort of tell them this, and the only person who had a slight inkling was my mum
Yeah.
from that conversation years ago. But they sat down, and my dad starts to guess again, doesn't he? You know, making himself laugh. So he sat us down. He's like, "You pregnant?" I'm like, "No." You know, "You getting a puppy?" I was like, "No." "Fancy men again?" I was like, "No." And then he just said it as a complete joke. You know, "You're not having a sex change, are you?"
Oh my God.
And really like joking. And I was just like, oh, shit. Like, I was just like, yeah, I am.
Wow.
And the colour just drained from his face. You know, he was just so shocked. And my brother was shocked, and my sister was, you know, they were just all so shocked. And my mum, obviously, you know, she had a slight idea, but even she said, you know, it was like being slapped across the face, because she realised in that moment that Jess had come to a point where if she doesn't do this,
Mm.
she's not going to be here anymore. Because
Mm.
she knew that for years I'd thought about not being here anymore because of this or that. And, you know, like I said to you before, the main thing that hits a parent is fear. You know,
Yes.
how are you going to be treated, the abuse you're going to get, you know. Trans people existence is questioned constantly within the media. Trans people, you know, get murdered and
Mm.
attacked daily for being trans. And the fear around the lack of education, and, you know, not knowing how it works and how you're going to live, and what about your job, and what if this is the wrong decision. You've made so many decisions, stupid decisions, right up until this point. And, you know, they gave birth to a daughter.
Yeah.
You know, they named that daughter, they had thoughts and dreams for that daughter. That's not just going to go away. You know,
Mm.
they named her Jessica, and they thought that he was going to walk her down the aisle and all these things. And suddenly that was going away. And for the first few months, we really butted heads, you know, me and my dad. And he didn't want to let go of his little girl. And, you know, it came to a point where I had to say, you know, it's either a dead daughter or a living son.
Wow.
You know, I can't do this. Like, I'm not taking Jess away. I love Jess. Like, I'm bringing her with me. I don't want you to, you know, I can only speak from my experience, but I don't want to delete her.
Yeah.
I'm not expecting you to delete anything or stop talking about it or take pictures down or anything. I don't even care if you call me she, her, or Jess for the rest of my life. All I care about is that you try,
Yeah.
and that you
Wow.
just accept who I am, because I can't do this. I can't have Jess be the image. I just can't. And I don't want to die. So I just need you to try,
My
because this is
God.
just who I am. And that started us off on this journey of, you know, let's do this. And before that point, sorry, I'd ran off. You know, I was off sick from the prison service. I never thought I'd be able to go back, because it was the most dangerous, volatile place to transition in. And I just moved to Brighton. And I was just like, I'm going, you know, Brighton is so open. It's so,
Yeah.
like, you know, LGBT friendly. It's, you know, I want to just go and live by the beach with my dogs and transition. And I didn't want anyone to see me. I didn't want anyone to see me in that awkward in between stage of still looking like Jess, but figuring out who Jax was. And,
Hence the reason you don't like me mentioning that video.
you know, yeah, because and that's when I made the video, because I wanted to tell everybody
Yeah.
in Wigan,
Yeah.
but not be there for everyone to go and look at me and assess me and watch all these tiny changes and all these things. And I just felt like a complete freak. I was like, no one's going to want to be friends with me. No one's going to want to be in a relationship with me again. You know, what am I going to do? I just wanted to disappear and come back 2 years later looking like I do now.
Wow.
You know, I didn't want to go through the journey.
That journey must be to take away family and everything else, just like you say, thinking about relationships, how people receive you that,
Yeah.
that don't, if you've moved to Brighton, nobody knows you. So
No.
how do you even navigate that when you're transitioning from Jess to Jax? And I know Brighton is super,
Yeah, I was
super
just so
inclusive,
stupid.
but
Yeah, and that's what I did, and I made that video and let it all come out, and it went, viral through the prison service in seconds, like I knew it would, and
yeah.
all these things. And so they suddenly knew why I was off sick, and I knew that my mum and dad would be like getting questions off everybody and all this stuff, and I just couldn't face it, and I did that, and that was the point where I was like, I was. That's when I first started having real suicidal thoughts, because I just thought I'm meant to be happy,
And you didn't feel it.
and I'd ran away from my whole support system. I'm sat there like making my dog's tea, like starting to panic because I've got a knife in my hand. And I'm thinking, why am I panicking that I've got a knife in my hand? If something happens to me, no one's coming. Like, I'm 4 hours away from home. Like, this is ridiculous. And I thought, and I was only there for about 2 months. So this was only like 2 months after I'd come out. I hadn't started hormones or anything. And it was at that point where I was like, you know what? Like, I said I was going to do this or I die. And if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it proper. And
How did that thought come? Because that's one hell of a thought.
because I've always believed in reminding yourself who you are. Like, on my hand it says, remember who you are.
Right.
Because I've always prided myself on being this mentally resilient, motivated person who could do anything they put their mind to. And I'd lost all of that. Well, I thought I had, because I thought I'd lost everything that Jess was.
Yeah.
And when I made the decision to do this or I die, well, there's no point doing it half-heartedly. I don't do anything half-heartedly. If anything, I do it full steam ahead and cause chaos. So why the hell am I not doing that now? I miss my friends. I miss my job. I miss my family. I miss my life. Like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it. And if it fails, I'm ready to die. So why the hell am I not just doing it? So obviously I moved back, and I made the decision to go back to work.
First day.
And I said this to you before, like, my mum's first reaction to that was, what's going to stop 5 lads dragging you in a cell and abusing you and trying to prove you're still a woman and whatever else? Because that risk is there as a prison officer anyway, but as something that is disapproved of, it heightens that risk massively.
Did you feel that fear? Were you scared that would happen?
Yeah, of course. But I had faith that I want to do this and take everyone on the journey with me.
Oh my God. I mean, I've got to say this, by the way, and I know we've discussed it, but I've got to kind of just put this in a neat line because this cannot be ignored. You transition as a prison officer with a genuine and probably realistic fear that you could be very badly assaulted in many different ways just because you're going to work at a time when you have established that this is probably a lot harder than you could have ever even imagined. And as you say there, do or die kind of thing, but still knowing that just by going to work, you're facing pretty much a risk of being so badly injured that you could end up dead anyway.
Yeah.
Like, that's a whole nother level of transitioning because I mean, it's your life. So for you, I know we spoke earlier before we started to record about how telling a story, you can sort of disassociate a little bit and it just becomes a script almost. Not, that sounds harsh, but you get so used to telling your story. But for me, thinking about, I visited someone, a friend of mine in prison once, and it's etiquette to go and buy the chocolate bar or the cup of tea.
Yeah.
It took me about half an hour to get the courage to walk down to the little tuck shop because you have to walk past all the prisoners. And I was like, you know how long it took me to start this podcast, going, right, you could do this. Times that by about 400. It took me forever just to walk down. So I'm thinking of the fear that I had just tottering down to the tuck shop in the visiting area where there's loads of security guards, or prison officers, sorry, and you have to go there as your job. in this situation. So I just want to highlight that is like being thrown in a shank of tarks. Or even a tank of sharks.
It's my mum here. That's what she does.
It's an age thing. I'm absolutely positive. Past 40, this is what
They're
happens
calling me
to the-
Fax Geely next.
It's a great name. It's a great name. I love it. No, so I just want to highlight that because I can't even begin to imagine
Yeah.
the fear that you have managed to. Again, I'm going to keep saying this throughout this whole episode. This isn't about, although we're talking quite a lot about the journey, about being trans or having a trans experience. It's about overcoming fear, overcoming not just fear, but being terrified of who you are going to be, taking away the mask, revealing all the parts of yourself that you've kept to yourself, and having to literally, in probably one of the most dangerous places, face the judgment of people that might want to hurt you.
Yeah, and that's why I talk so much about vulnerability now, because the power of that is unbelievable. Because, you know, if I hadn't, going back to work saved my life.
Wow.
You know, so if I hadn't have put myself in the situation for it to go really bad, I didn't put myself in the position for it to be amazing. And, you know, look where I am now. Like, this job saved my life and I'm saving others.
Yeah.
So, you know, making that decision was terrifying, but I knew that I had the ability, although I was terrified and I didn't know if I could still be, you know, how I was going to be, how the reaction was going to be, or if I could still be the same prison officer, you know, if I could still be this person. I knew I had the ability to help people change their life. And I went into that assuring people, that staff and prisoners, that it's okay to make mistakes and I'm still Feely and I don't want you to avoid me. I don't want you to avoid this conversation. Like, it's okay to get it wrong. It's okay to ask me questions as long as it's not malicious. Like, I'm just going to take everyone on this journey with me. We're all going to learn and we're just going to see what happens, because I didn't have a clue how to navigate this before I had to embark on this journey. So how can I expect anyone else to know what to do?
If someone doesn't contact you or me to make some kind of film about that, I don't know what's wrong with the world. Because that, I'm visualizing
not even
this.
started yet.
I know. This is the crazy thing. Like, that conversation where I'm going to take you all with me. So at that point, you've said this to all of the, you know, the staff, the prisoners. What's one of the first things you can remember? Let's focus on the prisoners for now. Hearing from a prisoner that was like reassuring you, I know I've made the right decision because.
So I went back. Obviously, a lot of the prisoners knew me. So they knew Miss Feely. I still looked very much like that. You know, it was 2 months after coming out. I hadn't started hormones. I'd shaved my head. I looked like I did on that video. You know, I looked more feminine with a shaved head than I did my entire life with long hair and heels, where people asked me if I was a bloke in pubs.
Yeah.
You know, I looked more feminine then because you could just see my face. And I look back now and I think, bloody hell, I thought I looked dead masculine then, you know. But I went back, and obviously initially it was with the staff and developing those relationships and stuff, but I went back to work on the unit that I work on now, that I worked on before, which is I've obviously told you before, but it's called a psychologically informed planned environment.
Yeah.
So we work with men who are very much stuck in the system, you know, have struggled with elements of personality disorder, struggled to manage their emotions, maintain the relationships, you know, understand their own trauma, why they act the way they do, you know, why they can't do certain things or understand certain things, communicate effectively, all these things. And we sit down and we do groups with them and stuff like that. And when I went back onto that unit, initially it was just sort of like allowing people to just ask me about it, which they would every now and again, you know, when they felt comfortable or they realised that I would joke about things, you know, like I'd be shouting at a prisoner and my voice would be hitting the roof when I was on hormones, and I'd be making a joke about it. But the first major thing was I sat down in one of these groups and I spoke to them about being suicidal and about vulnerability and about how you have to do the difficult things to get where you want to be in life, and you have to somehow find the courage to do the terrifying things, because people are brought up to believe that being vulnerable is weak and being courageous is strong.
Yeah.
And you know, the definition of vulnerability is risk, uncertainty, or emotional exposure. And there's not a single act of courage that you can carry out without going through risk, uncertainty, or emotional exposure.
So true.
And I would sit there and talk to them about all of this, and they were saying things to me like, "You're going to change my life. You know, you're going to make me a better man when I get out of prison," to my nieces and nephews, or, "If I hadn't have met you, I would never have agreed with it. I would never have understood it. And if you can be suicidal and go through your own journey and transition and walk back through a prison gate and come here and tell all of us about it, try and help us understand, help us with our own struggles whilst on your own journey," then it started to really give them the belief and the courage to change their own life and realise that it's not too late.
Yeah.
And to not be ashamed of who you are. And it started to really have a massive impact, and the respect that was developed between me and them was unbelievable, because they told me that I'd made them realise that officers were human too, and that we have lives outside of those gates, and that, you know, I can't expect you to sit here in a group and be vulnerable and not do it myself. And if I can help you figure out that you can, you know, get over this drug addiction or learn how to accept criticism and change your own life, then I'm going to do that. And I'll tell you what I've been through, because they knew that I weren't bullshitting.
Yes.
You know, they knew that that it was real, and they knew that I wasn't just sitting there preaching, going, "You've got to do the hard shit," because they were watching me go through it, and they've watched me from day one on the last 2.5 years go through that. And about a year down the line, we put on a transgender awareness event in the prison, and the lads on the unit, there's only 10 of them, but they were the only prisoners allowed to be involved, sort of thing, in this, because it was like an event for staff and to say thank you and different things. And I made a documentary with like my family and my colleagues and my governors and things like that, basically explaining the impact of someone transitioning, because it doesn't just affect me, it affects everyone around me.
Yeah.
And I had t-shirts made, and I had 3 t-shirts made in the colour of the trans flag, like blue, white and pink, and they all had a butterfly on the front, and on the back they all had quotes that I live by. So one of them had "Remember who you are," one of them had "Be unapologetically you," and another one had "Feel the fear and do it anyway." And one of the men came up to me, and he had a pink one on, and he said to me, "You know what, I'm and there was about 150 people at this event, like from different establishments and all the staff from ours and stuff." And he says to me, "I feel like I'm gonna wear a jumper under my t-shirt." So I'm thinking, right, it's boiling up there, you know, like, why? And he said, well, in fact, I'll give you a bit of background on him first. Years ago, they used to give out what's called an IPP sentence, which is basically a life sentence for people who were a bit of a nuisance.
Right.
So they don't do it anymore, because it just gives people no hope whatsoever.
Like a 3 strikes and you're out kind of rule in America.
Yeah. So like if they were like a repeat offender and they were a bit of, you know, then they might get sentenced to 1 year, but it's a life sentence. You're on license forever, so you have to pass a parole board just to get out of prison.
Right.
So for these people who are, you know, drug addicts or like never dealt with the trauma or whatever, and the repeat offenders for petty crime, and then they've been given an IPP sentence, they get stuck in prison because they get stuck in the system, because they can't manage their own emotions and anything enough to either behave or get through prison to pass a parole board, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So this guy is someone who received an IPP sentence, and he got sentenced to 2 years, and he's been in for 16.
Bloody hell.
Because he's never been able to pass a parole board. And he's worked with me for the last 2 years and stuff, and he came up to me on that morning and said he was going to wear a jumper. And when I asked him why, he said, "Well, I've never left the wing in 16 years without long sleeves on, because he's got quite horrendous self-harm scars on his arms and stuff, and he was really ashamed of them." And I said to him, "What does it say on the back of that t-shirt?" And he says, "Be unapologetically you." I said, "So what do we always talk about?" I said, "That's part of your journey, that's part of who you are.
Yes.
Those scars are proof that you made it through.
Yes.
Don't you dare hide a part of who you are. Like, you go up there and you show everyone how far you've come, because look at you now, you've completely changed your life. You're drug free, you're violence free, you've got a hell of a lot of respect for me and the staff. You know, you've turned into the man that you were supposed to be. You go up there and you tell everyone.
Oh my God, she's going to cry.
And he did. And he went up and he made a speech in front of 150 people, my mum being one of them, and spoke about how I'd changed his life and how much I'd inspired him, and told everyone about his scars and that he didn't want to come up there, and that he's realised that it's part of his journey and it's part of who he is, and he wants to inspire other people to change their life.
I mean, that alone,
yeah,
must have been so profoundly life-changing for you. That
he tells me all the time, he's like, you've no idea how much you've changed my life.
do you resonate with that though? Because that's actually quite a difficult thing to accept. I think that although you know that what you're doing is actually your experience is really paying it forward and meant to be for something greater than you could ever really put into words, when someone actually says to you, you've literally changed my life, because you're quite a humble human, I'd imagine you just go, oh, all right, thanks.
Yeah, I am. And that's why I'm so passionate about the fact that it's not about gender.
No, it's not.
It's about life.
Yes.
You know, we have all got to go through these transitions, whether it's drug addict to not, prison to not, military to not, gender to gender, you know, relationship, job, locate, whatever it is. We've all got to go through these transitions, however big or small.
It's just metamorphosis, isn't it? The butterfly on your neck. It's just going from the caterpillar to the butterfly. Exactly, and you might do that 12 times in one lifetime.
Exactly. And that's what it is. It's constant, and you have to find the courage to live your truth, whatever that means to you, because if you're not completely authentic in yourself, nothing else in your life is 100% authentic.
So I couldn't agree more. And on the self-harm story, I've spoken openly about that myself, and I get a lot of teenage girls that are exploring different ways of expressing themselves and using maladaptive coping styles like self-harm. And I did that for many years and spent a long time with my arms turned down because they would be on the forearms there. And actually I do resonate with that story so much, because it is something that people carry shame about, because you know, you are labeled crazy if you're a self-harmer. You're labeled angry if you're hitting out at other people. No one says, let me ask what's going on for you. And so for him to have that conversation with you, and you allowed him to free himself from that BS that he's somehow got to be ashamed of his story. Actually, when a young person says to me, this is what I'm doing, I say, look, I'm not going to show you because you don't need to see them. But I used to do that too. I spent a long time being really ashamed of it and thinking, oh, what will people think? And now I'll just tell them, yeah, I used to self-harm quite badly, but you know, here I am, and I'm healthy and happy, and I'm not triggered by your story because I did the work, and I'm going to help you do that too. And that's exactly what you're giving people, but not just in relation to a trans experience. You're giving it to people that you do, and you don't have to be this person. Like, this is just naturally who you are. You could be angry still if you wanted to be. And so on that note, with being authentic and being vulnerable, which I think is the most beautiful thing that anyone can ever be, by the way, but on that note, you know, those people that do still have like a massive issue with either race, sexuality, gender, whatever it is, what's your opinion on that? You know, it doesn't have to be in relation to your experience per se, but just that type of person that just thinks that they own the world and they get to decide who should be who. What's your opinion?
I love that. To be honest, so I don't entertain negativity sort of within my space now. You know, I think once you find peace in yourself, you know, you kind of just stop really caring and really realize that there is a problem within them there. You know, they're struggling with something, and a lot of the time I think trans people are a trigger for people who have not got the courage to live their truth. And that doesn't mean that they're trans or they're gay or whatever. It means that it's, you know, they might have a fear of leaving the marriage, or you know, leaving the job, or you know, starting a new life and doing the things that they actually know would actually make them happy. But the risk is too big for them to take in sort of in the world. And I think that not everybody, but for some people, I think that's that's a massive trigger. And I said to you earlier, I don't get abuse in prison, but on TikTok I get told to kill myself on a daily basis because people think that it's okay to just sit in the seats and throw shit at the people playing the game because they're too frightened to do it themselves. But like I said to you before, if you're not out there doing what terrifies you, I have absolutely no interest in what you've got to say.
Which is just phenomenal.
If you don't love me and you don't know me and you've not got my best interests, I don't care. If my mum tells me I'm being an asshole, then fair enough, I'll listen. But if you tell me I'm being an asshole, that's your opinion. That's a you problem. Like I'm not bothered. But I don't tend to sort of let myself dive into it too much because I do what I do because some people will listen to those people who tell them to kill themselves.
Yes, you're right.
And there needs to be people who... Visibility is the very thing that reassures people that their life is worth living.
Yes.
So if people can't see themselves in the media, on screen, in magazines, on TikTok, whatever, they don't... But that people are choosing suicide instead of being themselves. And if people can see me at the front of a magazine or on TikTok and know that you can have a family and a great relationship with your siblings and a career and a life and be happy, then they will realize that it's okay and that you don't have to listen to the idiots who have absolutely no idea what living authentically means.
The interesting thing about that is, and I totally agree, by the way, and I think I always feel like the people that are being authentic are like magnets and you just want to be near them.
People can feel it. It's energy.
They can. And they can feel it through through social media. You can see who the genuine people are. But what I'm about to say refers more to and with the work that you do with the prisoners, the sort of cognitive biases that we hold about ourselves and about other people as well. And something that you've said there about visibility being so important, obviously it's a massive part of your journey because you went down the YouTube route and saw people that were actually living a life that you could go, oh, it is what I want. You could really resonate with that. But there's this thing where if we repeat something over and over again, like you did, I want to be Jess, as you part of your affirmation, I want to be a girl, I'm happy being a girl. We do actually, for some time at least, start to believe that's true.
Yeah, definitely.
And so then if you are somebody that has done that and has had that all around you, and say they're in a position like you were, where you had that thought, do I just want to be a boy?
Yeah.
What would you say to anyone that's listening that's got a friend or a family member in that position, or if they are themselves listening because they are going through that? What would you say is the best way to keep pushing through it? Because there's not one piece of advice you could give somebody.
No, yeah, of course not. And I can only speak from my experience. My experience is very different to every other trans person. It's very sort of unique and individual to that person. But in my experience, in terms of finding the courage to make a change, you have to weigh up, am I willing to not do this and regret it?
Yeah.
Or am I willing to do this and go through the difficult things for the long-term satisfaction and what's going to make me happy in the long run? Because I have to do the hard things now. People, you have to repeatedly look yourself in the mirror and tear yourself apart and go, why am I acting like this? What is it? What is the pain point? If you suppress something, it's only going to come out in a different way. You keep suppressing it, you're going to be angry, you're going to ruin your relationships, you might lose your job, you might do something else. It's only going to come out in a different way.
On that note, because that's really interesting, because there'll be some people, and I know this, I talk about this a lot, the brain body link. There'll be some people that won't be angry, they won't be showing it, they will be suppressing it, and they'll be feeling it. So I will talk a lot about the inflammatory response when we're constantly in fight flight, or if we're constantly in the cortisol response. So if you're not living your authentic self, that will be very, very stressful. as you know. And that means you're constantly releasing the cortisol more so than you would if you're in a healthy state of mind. So your body will start to become inflamed because cortisol is acidic. So
Mm.
your body gets inflamed and you might have gut issues, or you might have pain in your body. Like some people will talk about fibromyalgia, they've got these pain spots all over their body, or headaches or migraines or fatigue. Did you go through anything like that, or were you more getting it out through the anger, do you think?
Um, I mean, I don't think so. I used to always get headache. I used to get. I mean, I still do now, but I used to get anxious
Yeah.
and headache, and like
Mm.
just really like just want to sleep.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that it's mentally exhausting trying to keep a mask on. You know, I
Yes.
would be exhausted and angry after work because I just spent 12 hours being Jess.
Yeah.
Whereas now, you know, people see me and they go, "Well, you're exactly the same." I'm like,
Hmm.
well, I know, but it's natural now. And I've got
Yeah.
all this more headspace because
Yeah.
my head was just clogged up. And now I'm exactly the same, but it's natural happiness. I'm not trying.
Yeah.
I'm not exhausted because I'm not trying to keep that up. I'm just naturally that way. You know, so it does come out physically. You know, when I do all of this stuff with the prisoners and stuff like that, it comes out physically for me because I'm so sort of in tune with them and what
Yeah.
I'm exhausted after like a 2 hour conversation because I like to be so present and,
Yes.
you know, sort of help them in whatever way I can or whatever conversation I'm having. I like to be present in that, so it will exhaust me afterwards.
Would you say that you're not, although you would have suppressed for many, many years,
Hmm.
were there ways that, because when you mentioned playing rugby there actually, and I think you probably found quite a, because they always say with exercise, you sort of release emotion through emotion. So you being so active, do you think that was helping you to not store that emotion in
Oh,
your
oh
body?
God, yeah. So when I first joined the military, when I was 19, I'd had like fleeting thoughts about being a gay woman, and was kind of quite a lot very anxious before I joined the military. And
Because you weren't out yet? Is that
just in general, I was
in
just
general?
anxious and depressed. And I didn't really know why. I
Right.
was having like thoughts about that and different
Yeah.
things, but I just always thought that I was an anxious person. You know, you have to develop the ability to look yourself in the mirror and sort of like rip yourself apart sort of thing,
Yeah.
and repeatedly. You know, you can't just do it once and then think, well, I'm the finished article. Like, you have to do that like again and check yourself and think, am I going down the right path? Am I happy? What do I really want? What are my values? What aligns with me? You know, who have I got in my life? Who have I got around me? Like, all this stuff that affects you and what you want out of your life, and, you know, what you want for your future. You've got to be able to go, I have to figure out that what that is and face it and stop dealing with all this surface level shit.
So, with that being said, because that's a lot to work out when other people aren't perhaps on side with you, or struggling.
Mm,
Doesn't mean they're not on your side, but they're struggling with it. And you referenced your dad earlier.
yeah.
Um, so whilst you're working out your values and who you are and everything else, he's going through, I guess, somewhat of a grief
Mm,
process for you, as you say, didn't want to let go of his little girl. Tell me about your relationship with your dad now, because that must have been, well, with your mum and dad, because you said earlier about I just wanted to make them proud. And
yeah.
then you know, to sew that piece of the puzzle together, you want to make them proud. That's all you care about. You think it's going to make
Mm,
you happy. You realize actually this is not going to
yeah.
make me happy. I have to be
Yeah.
authentic. By being authentic, the reaction is not the one of pride immediately, more of fear, as you
Mm,
say. So for someone who has spent their whole life banking on this,
mm.
needing it, and really focusing on it, that must have been like a moment of regret, maybe, like not regret so much as I wish I hadn't done this, but regret that now you've all got to come on this journey with me.
Yeah. I tried to go into it with the most open mind and understanding as possible, because for that reason, you know, transitioning doesn't just affect me, it affects everyone
Yeah.
around me.
Yeah.
And I think you have to give people that time and that space to learn and understand and figure it all out and go through that grieving process. You know, I've had to grieve Jess, so have they. And I think by doing that, it's allowed them to, you know, come on this journey and, you know, me tell them everything I'm doing. I'm doing this because of this, or this has this impact, and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, my dad's first initial reaction was, well, we're going to have to leave Wigan. I'm
Wow.
going to end up punching everybody.
Yeah, because he's going to fight
Because
for you.
him and my brother thought that I was just going to get a world of abuse. Like, they were never angry at me for being me. They were terrified of how I was going to be treated in this world because, you know, people hear the word transgender and immediately they just think man in a dress.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Because of years and years of clumsy representation in the media of it's always the prostitute who gets murdered, it's always the visible man in a dress, you know, and throughout the years of that, that is what they have been brought up with. That is what, you know, they know the abuse that I'm going to get. And it was just crippled with fear, and they've been through every emotion going. But over this time, and me including them, and me not just saying accept it, me sort of taking it into consideration. And I think a lot of you know, it's the responsibility of your support system as well as the person going
Yeah.
through that transition, because as much as you need them to learn and understand, they need you to learn and understand, you know, what effect it has on them. And you know, in generations to come that might not be the case, but right now that's what it is. And you have to sort of allow people to go through that. And you know, 2 years later, my dad, um, he came home to me a couple of months ago, and he'd just started a new job as um, the manager at this company, and he'd only been there a few weeks, and he's a man of few words in terms of, you know, me transitioning and stuff. He doesn't say a massive amount, but he came home one day and told me this story, and he was only 2 weeks into this job, and he'd heard a conversation between, I think, some of the women in the admin bit. And I think this woman was in her 60s, and she wasn't being malicious, but they were having a conversation about gender. And this woman was saying, you know, well, I think if you're born this way, that's what you are, and etc. And my dad was overheard this conversation, and he was thinking, right.
Mm-hmm.
So he'd gone into like one of the HR women who knew him and knew a bit about like me and his story and stuff, and said to her, you know, like, what do I do here? Like, if I go and tell her that now, she's going to want the floor to swallow her up, you
True.
know,
Yeah.
like, I don't want to do that. And the HR lady was like, it's all right, I'll tell her, you know. And he went up to her later on in the day and was like, you're all right now, love. And this woman just burst into tears, you know,
Oh.
was absolutely mortified and was like, I'm so sorry, Terry. Like, I didn't mean it, you know, I'm sorry. And he's watched how I've dealt with this throughout the whole 2 years, and he's gone through a journey himself. And he was like, it's okay, you know, like, don't worry, just be a bit mindful when you're speaking. You know, I could
Mm.
have been sat there and she wouldn't have known. And go on his podcast and go on his YouTube and do this and do that. And he came home and said this to me, and I was like, have you any idea what you've just done?
That's incredible.
And he was just like, what? And I was like, you've just changed a mindset.
Mm.
And by changing one, you change 100,
Yeah.
because she'll take that home and she'll tell someone else, or it would have affected her. You've hit her emotion. And as soon as you do that, you make people realize that it could happen to them at any point, because people don't look into this until it affects their life. And by just having that conversation and dealing with it in the right way,
Yes.
because you knew she weren't being malicious, you've invited a safe space for her to go, oh my God. And you've probably just changed her mindset and a lot of other people.
That leads me to a point that I'm curious about, actually, is that when I think Tony Robbins famously says something like, you know, it's a negative positive, and I don't fully agree with it, but I also adopt it at the same time. Like, when you want to be successful,
Mm.
who are you trying to prove it to? Um, and, you know, what's your drive for that success? What's your drive for what you do? What's your why and all that? We know all of that. But to expand on that, something I'm really interested in, particularly with you, is who do you really want to hear you? Is it a vast array of people, or is there like because you mentioned the support system there being so important, is it more that you're talking to everybody, be it that you're a friend of someone, a family member, a colleague?
Mm.
Are you really having a much broader conversation? I mean, we are right now, but generally day to day, is that really what you're hoping to achieve? So it's not just for the, you know, the kid that's doubting who they are and how
Yeah,
to go.
yeah,
It's because that support system, as you say, in any aspect of
yeah.
anyone's life, is the most fundamental part of whether we have the juice to keep going, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I definitely think I'm trying to speak to everyone, you
Yeah.
know, because that's what I believe. Like, I believe that people don't. One of the most common phrases said on people's deathbed which nurses and carers have reported, is I wish I'd have lived a life more true to myself.
Wow. I mean, that's sad.
Because it's scary. People don't do things because of other people's opinions, or because of what society says, or because this is going to be difficult, and I want to I want this easy life. But if you don't do the hard things now, you can't have an easy life later. If you
No.
just do all the easy things now, it's not gonna be great for you later, because you have to go through those difficult things, whatever it is, whatever it means. And I say to my mum and dad and parents and employers and whoever, all anybody needs in the home, in a job, in whatever, is to feel safe and
Yeah.
accepted. That's all you need. It's not about businesses putting policies in. It's not about trying to force your child to be okay to be trans or whatever. It's just about allowing them to be themselves. And if you can create the safe space where they feel okay to go, I feel like this today, I want to do this, I feel like dressing like this, I can come to you about this conversation, I feel like this has happened, and embed those values in your family or in your business or whatever, so that the people who are not very nice or are not okay with it stand out like a sore thumb,
Yeah.
because everybody else will turn around and go, we're not like that here.
And so we need role models, actually. Like, I talk about mental health in terms of CEOs quite a lot, because CEOs are in quite an isolated position in the fact that they are the top of the pyramid, if you like.
Yeah.
Not that I'm saying they're pyramid schemes, but you know what I mean. So they're the top of the castle. And actually, at that position, there's quite a lot of stigma around, how am I going to trust you to, and give you this job of CEO to run this company if you've got mental health problems, because you're not going to have the the juice to keep going. You're not going to have that strength to push through whatever comes your way. So if a CEO is willing to talk about mental health, if a CEO is willing to talk about making a safe space for everybody, and is willing to say, I'm going to highlight this, if I'm going to call you out, if you're somebody that makes somebody else feel unsafe, you will be called out. What would you say is the biggest challenge there? Because I feel very strongly, as a small business owner, that I would definitely do that. I would definitely call out that behaviour, and I would definitely say, I don't care what you think about me. I don't care what you say about me. If you are being prejudiced in any way, shape or form, you're not welcome. But if you have got 2,000 people and this business is going to lose business because of media narrative and all of that stuff, what do you think the biggest challenge is for you and for me and for society in making sure that we're not just using campaigns and oh, here's a LGBTQI campaign for this month, pride awareness or whatever? How do we actually go about role modeling that correctly so that it is actually a safe place and not just a buzzword?
I think the first step is to allow people, get people in, whether that's me or somebody else, to tell a real story in the right way. Because if you don't hit someone's emotion, they're not interested.
Yes.
If I go and do a talk, I'll often say, don't tell them what it's about.
Yeah.
Because you say to someone this is about trans, you've lost half the room.
Yeah.
Because they're not interested. It's not affected their life. They're not bothered. They've got
so
a prejudice. Also, they think, So if you can tell people the story and humanize it and make them realize that it isn't just about that topic, diversity and inclusion or whatever it is, it's about, this can happen to anyone, you've got to be prepared for that. And these people are just normal and they just want to feel human. So I think if you can provide the education in the right way, instead of just going, here's your yearly diversity and inclusion training, which no one's interested, which people won't be interested in, or it's a tick box or whatever else, then I think that's the first step in terms of businesses showing that they are inclusive. I think it's the tiny little things that no one ever thinks about. Don't just fly the pride flag for Pride Month. Fly it all year. Make it a part of the value within your community. Put your pronouns on the end of your email, because you show that. Allow people to voluntarily wear a pronoun badge or whatever it is. Have the comfortable conversations. People want to talk about leadership, but they don't want to talk about vulnerability. You being a CEO and being terrified of having the conversation with your new trans employee is you not being vulnerable. Because you're scared of the conversation. Have the conversation. Allow that person to realize that they can speak to you, and that you're not going to you're not going to isolate them in any way, because if you favour them and are terrified of the conversation, if they've done something wrong, in case you're going to get whatever, then you're going to isolate them from everybody else, because I've had several people be like bitter or whatever else about my achievements because they think it's because you're trans, or you're not getting in trouble because
Uh-huh.
you're trans. But if you then completely avoid them
Mm.
and not speak to them at all and just leave them to it, then you're also isolating them, because you're
Yeah.
making them feel like you don't care and you
Mm.
don't appreciate it. And don't get me wrong, there's people who play the system and take advantage of that, but the majority of people just want to feel safe and happy in the people who are around in the workplace, and it shouldn't be so terrifying to just be yourself.
And if we think about that, if someone's in a domestic abuse situation, or if someone is, the only person of color in their team, or if someone is um, going through a big life change of any, even having a child that's disabled and
Mm.
needing more time off, or at least more time at home,
Yeah.
those are always uncomfortable conversations, aren't they? Because although I absolutely agree in everything you've just said, so many people have still got so far to come.
Yeah.
And I think because CEOs are by nature, they've had to protect so much to get to where they've
Mm.
got to and toe the line to be seen as good enough. The conversation that I think needs to be, like you say, repeatedly. It's not just like, let's have this meeting and talk about this month.
No, yeah.
It's making sure that you're checking in with individuals, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
that CEO that is seen and heard. Have you met anyone in your life, or even at work, or do you know of anyone in a higher position that does do that piece?
I mean, in terms of, in my experience, I can't compliment the prison service enough in that sense, because they didn't know what to do when I said I wanted to come back. Initially I said I want to go back on nights because I just wanted to hide in the dark. I didn't
Yeah.
want to face a prisoner, but that I only did that for 2 weeks, and then I was like, no, I want to do this. I want to be around my friends or whatever. And because it's not about putting a policy in place, because everyone's so different, by allowing me to kind of navigate it, not take the piss, but just say like, oh well, men wear ties in winter months in the prison service, which is quite behind in this like sort of movement. But I said to my number one, I don't feel comfortable wearing a tie because it kind of highlights that I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't have before.
Mm.
Like tiny little things like that just meant something to me. Or they let someone come out and walk in with me. One of my good friends went the first time I went back in because I was terrified,
Yeah.
and they might check in with an email with me once a month just to see if I was all right. But no, don't mollycoddle me. Don't
Yeah.
make it a big deal. Don't
Yeah.
make me look like I'm favoured. You shouldn't be checking in on me just because I'm trans. You should be checking in on everybody.
Yes.
You should be
Yes.
it should be a monthly email to everybody. How are you feeling? What's happening?
Yeah, I agree.
And obviously I appreciated that, but overall, everyone should have that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because everyone's got their own things going on. Everyone has got family struggles, or whatever is going on in their life. So I appreciate that managers don't have time to like check on everybody all the time, but once a month you send an email to say just checking in, whatever. Think people appreciate things
They
like
do.
that, because when it comes down to you making a decision as a manager about the company, all they're going to turn around and go, well, you don't know anything about us, so
Yes.
how do you know how this works? How do you
Yeah.
know how this feels? You've just come up with, in a prison, a brand new regime, and you've not even thought about how that affects your officers on the ground.
And interestingly, the prison service, I suppose, like a lot of, and there's good and bad and everything, of
Yeah, of
course,
course, yeah.
but a lot of those big services like the police service or the NHS or whatever, you often hear all, again, media, all the bad stuff.
Mm.
But actually, in your case, what you're saying is they let you navigate that, and they worked with you
Yeah,
rather than
definitely, yeah.
told you
No, yeah.
or you telling them.
Because if um if at any point they'd have said no, my life would have gone in a very different direction.
Yeah.
If they'd have at any point, especially in those early months, said no, I'd have said, right, well, I can't go back to work,
Yeah.
or I can't do that, or they put me on a landing and it's actually really, 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 really dangerous because I was very at the beginning,
Yeah.
very obviously sort of visibly trans, so to speak.
Yeah.
So it put me in a more dangerous situation.
Talking about the prison service allowing you to navigate it, and you were saying that if they hadn't have given you I think the freedom to
Yeah.
navigate it on your own terms, you would have either not had a job at all, or you would have had to do this whole thing in a completely different environment, what
Yeah.
would have happened? What do you think you would have done?
I think me being me, I would have carried on, but I think it would have been very difficult. I would have had a world of abuse.
Yeah.
Um,
So, funnily enough, prison service being what on paper what looks like, oh, that's the worst thing anyone can imagine.
yeah.
You ended up feeling safer in that.
Yeah, because it was about the people I was around. You know, I was around. I went back onto a unit where some of my best friends were. You know, it was a safe place for me to be, where I know that they would step in if I was getting any abuse. Because don't get me wrong, I had moments where it was awful, or
I can
you
only
know,
imagine.
and um, and obviously, you know, getting called miss a lot and stuff like that. Like it was hard. I can speak about it now so positively, but I make no qualms about the fact that it was really hard, especially for like the first 6 to 12 months. But I was someone who very much needed a uniform and a routine and to be
Mm.
around people, and it really helped me develop this identity that I thought I'd lost,
Mm-hmm.
and also develop who Jax was and is.
So the comment there about the uniform, you mentioned earlier that you were in the military as well,
Mm,
and so I think obviously a big part of your coping mechanism is probably about discipline. I wanted to touch on that a little bit because I think you hear this spoken about a lot on various different podcasts, why discipline is so important.
mm,
And I think from most of your story, actually, there are moments where that discipline kicks back in.
yeah,
You know, I said to you about what was that thing that made you keep going. And I think it's just that installation early on of this discipline, be it through sport, be it through the military, be
yeah,
it through. So would you agree that actually finding a discipline early on in life, whether it be sport, whether it be, you know, even creatively, I suppose, something that you know, I get up because I want to do this, or I get up because I believe this is the right thing for me to
yeah.
do?
I think people start to deteriorate when they lose a sense of worth and they
Mm.
lose a sense of purpose. And I think, you know, whether for me, whether that's been sport or the military or the prison service or whatever, I've always had a massive sense of pride in uniform. You know, for me, I always struggled figuring out what to wear because I was so dysphoric. So, you know, I could just finish work at dinner time, but if I stayed in my uniform, I could get loads done.
Yeah.
But going out of uniform, I just become no one, and I'm like, my head would fall off because I just thought, wow. And obviously, within like sport or the military, you know, you eat then, you wear this, you do this now. You know, it's very people need structure. You know, even because from being 4 years old, people go to school and they go, right, you here at this time. This is when you eat. This is what you
Yeah.
wear.
Yeah.
So as soon as people leave school, people start to do like, well, what do I do? Where do I
Yes,
go?
you're
You know,
right.
because people need a sense of achievement. People need a sense of worth, what you're working towards, you know, because it's not about the end goal. Like people think that happiness is the end goal. It's about finding the happiness
In the
and
doing.
in your daily life. You know,
Yeah.
it's not about winning marriage, it's about staying married.
Yeah.
It's not about winning the career, it's about staying in that job and enjoying what you're doing, or you know, enjoying your training or working towards things. You know,
Yeah.
for me in the transition, I had to learn to enjoy the journey and enjoy the tiny little wins. Because are you familiar with Alex Hormozy?
No.
So he said a quote that I massively resonated with, and it says, you don't become confident by shouting affirmations in the mirror. You do so by gaining a stack of undeniable proof that you are who you say you are.
I love that so much.
Outwork your self doubt, because you have to repeatedly prove to yourself on a daily basis that you are who you're saying you are,
Yeah.
because that is how you become confident. You can't fake confidence by saying, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this, when you know deep down you're not.
So true. And that's why a lot of people say stuff like, oh, don't tell people you're going to do something before you
Mm.
do it because you're not,
Because
you
you
know.
convince yourself you've already done it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. However, for me, if I don't tell you I'm going to do it, I'm not going to
Yeah.
actually action it.
Yeah. And you're like holding yourself accountable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do that. I'll say, you know, I'm gonna launch a podcast, and then
Yeah.
I do it. So it actually makes me do it. But the point is that I agree with that entirely. Like some people would never have a reason to get out of bed
No.
because they've gone through the school system, come out of it and gone, well, I don't know what to do. I wasn't particularly academic,
Yeah.
or they didn't feel that they were intelligent. Later on, they find out they've got intelligence in multiple ways, but they've got nothing to get out of bed for. So
Yeah.
they self-soothe instead through maladaptive coping styles, whether it's drinking,
Mm.
taking drugs, or whatever. And this is where I think things like exercise or sport, or a job that it doesn't have to be an amazing career. I hate the
No.
emphasis on career. It's more about doing something that gives you a sense of
Yeah.
purpose.
Yeah, exactly. Because people put the happiness on external things, and it's an inside job. Like people, whether it's a relationship, if I'm not with you, I'm not happy. If
Yeah.
I'm not, if I'm not doing that, I'm not happy. And they attach their identity and their happiness onto other things instead of going, I need to look in the mirror and figure out what it is.
Yeah.
Because I didn't sit with Jess for a long time, and as soon as I did, I crumbled because there was nothing else to distract me. People live in a world of distractions and filling voids and
Yes.
not dealing with the actual pain point, So it's James Smith. Do you know who James Smith
I
is?
do. I love him.
Yeah. So when he talks about the pain point in people when they go to him for personal training and say, right, well, I want a six pack, I want to look good in my bikini for summer. That is the surface level reason that will not get you out of bed when you don't want to get out of bed.
Yeah.
The reason that you'll get out of bed is the pain point of the fact that your husband won't have sex with you with the light on.
Yes, you're right. Yeah.
Because that is what will get you out of bed and will give you the discipline. You're not going to wake up motivated 99% of
It's
the
that
time.
negative positive. And I do believe that we can use a negative psychology to create a positive outcome. And too many people have got that, toxic positivity. Just be happy. Just put on a smile. Actually,
you have to do the hard shit.
You do. You have to do the really hard shit. You do have to do the hard shit. There are days where you will not want to get out of bed, and you will not want to go to the gym, and you will not want to go to work, and you will not want to go even for, I don't know, you won't even want to eat.
Yeah.
But and this is actually one of my guests, Laura, who came on, she was talking about some things that she'd gone through, and she said this, and I think this is really good to refer to. She said when she was going through addiction and she had no reason to get out of bed, the gym for her was really useful because if she wanted to go to the gym, she knew she had to eat.
Yeah.
So actually having the desire to go to the gym gave her a community. It gave her the motivation to eat, to look after herself. And that's what people fail to see about going to the gym. I mean, I know gyms are a bit of an alpha environment for a lot of people, and I've experienced that myself, but I do go. And I think you've just got to really focus on you, focus on the desired outcome, which I think is always a sense of accomplishment. More than anything else. If you can get out of bed and go to the gym, you will first of all feel that you're being consistent. You will feel more aligned with who you really are because we are designed to move our bodies. You will also get the rush of endorphins, but you'll also know the next day when you feel like you can't get out of bed, actually, that's just a thought. The reality is I can get out of bed, but my thought is maladaptive for whatever reason. So what's going on to affect my thoughts? What is it? And you said there you actually eventually sat with Jess and you allowed that space to be heard and felt. And it was at the time that you really you probably did have maladaptive thoughts at the time that were stopping you from being who you really were. I mean, in your case, you were angry or aggressive or whatever. But actually, when you're sitting with yourself and you go, do you know what? Like, I can't keep making these excuses anymore. I've just got to be either who I really am or I've got to do what I really need to do. And you've mentioned the transition thing, and it's that transition from running away from yourself to becoming who you really are.
Yeah, exactly. Like you've almost got a transition from who you are to who you want to be.
Yeah. Every day.
Yeah, all the time. And that is the message more than anything else. I can't shout it from the rooftops enough. You've got to do the difficult things.
Yeah, which I know you keep going back to. So now you've done all of that. This is probably a good closing point, actually. But now you've done all of that. Okay. I mean, obviously, every day could be full of scary things.
Yeah.
Like driving to Northampton, for example. Walking in to meet someone for the first time or whatever. But what's the big thing for you? What's the next big thing that's a little bit scary? Because obviously you've done probably the biggest one, but there must be other things that scare you still.
I mean, bumping into my dad in the toilet's still scary for me. That's something that I never thought I would have to do.
I've not even thought about
but
that
I've
before.
never done that.
Yeah.
So it's the tiny little things that scare me. The big things are never a problem. It's the tiny little things. Like
that's insane. I've never even considered that.
Yeah, just things that were never before,
Yeah.
you know, or that like highlight things or whatever. Because I'm so open about everything, but the little bits of confidence building is hard, you know.
Going into a toilet, actually, I know I said we were closing, but that's a big media,
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
focus. For you, was there any problems with that moment in time when you were from, female toilets
I
to
was
male
just
toilets?
terrified.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's difficult because, you know, I can't wee standing up. So you've always got to wait for the disgusting cubicle.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing that I think
And
that
there's
must be
much less in
horrific.
a men's toilet and it stinks and
Yeah.
whatever else. But, you know, it's the thing in the media is safety for women. And I'm all up for safety for women. Of course I am, like I used to be one.
Yeah.
It's not that. It's the fact that I can guarantee you people are not going to pretend to be trans to
No.
assault somebody.
No.
If they want to walk into a women's toilet to assault someone, a man will.
Yeah. You don't have to dress up as a woman to
Yeah.
do that.
If they don't do it in the toilet, they will do it somewhere
Yeah.
else. And it's just a ridiculous point that the media is getting on top of and just driving because it's the easiest thing to do.
Clickbait.
Yeah, exactly, and it's not okay, you
No.
know, because it's putting trans people at even more risk. And
It seriously is. And I think the people that push that narrative without the scope of education.
yeah,
And I want to say this actually because I often don't say a lot because it may not be an appropriate time to do it. And I always like to have the voice of the person that's got the experience so I can do that properly. But for me, if you're going to read the Daily Mail and you're going to see something about trans people in toilets sexually abusing children from someone that's been sexually abused, most people are sexually abused by someone they know in their own homes, if
yeah,
not a close member of the family. So to villainize somebody who's just trying to crack on with their life
yeah,
and make it feel and seem like that person is going to sexually abuse a child is disgusting, number one, uneducated, number two, and unnecessary, number
yeah,
three. As you say, if someone wants to sexually abuse a child, they're going to do it. They're going to be a caretaker in the school.
yeah,
There could be your dad in your own home. There could be your uncle. There could be your dad's best friend. It could be someone that's a teacher. It's not a person just trying to live their life going into the toilet. And I think you can always tell. If you go into a toilet, and this happens, you go into a toilet, there's male cleaners in the toilet. I've never once thought, I don't know about you, when I've gone into a toilet, there's a male cleaner. He must be a sexually abusive person that
no,
wants to
exactly,
be a paedophile, and he's cleaning. He's been
yeah,
asked to. You could say, oh, well, maybe he's doing that because he wants to sexually abuse children or a woman. No, he's just cleaning. End of story. And
yeah,
actually it's not okay to do that. It's bullying, and it's
yeah.
uneducated, and it's quite
People don't
frankly
agree with
stupid.
what they don't understand, and it just escalates, and they don't realize, you know, the dangers that they put people in. You know, people, I wouldn't wish transitioning on anyone.
No.
You know, and like that video we watched before, there wouldn't be anything to transition from if society didn't put physical characteristics on a social. Well, gender is, so, you know, it's a social thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not biological.
Can we reference that? Because I was trying to look for that person's name. Is he Micah Valentine? Is that his name?
I don't know. I'll find it for you.
I think it's Micah Valentine. Valentine. Sorry, I just want to reference that because that video that you showed me, that was on TikTok.
Yeah.
And he did a 2 or 3 minute video on the idea of gender, and it's a really interesting little watch that I think is a game changer.
Because it talks about the fact that your biological sex, so to speak, is literally just something that you was assigned at birth. Sex and gender are a completely different thing. A lot of people think they're the same thing. So sex is biologically what you was assigned at birth. Gender is split into your gender expression and your gender identity.
Yeah.
People's gender expression goes throughout a spectrum, you know, on a daily basis. They might feel more feminine at times, might feel more masculine at times. They might identify as a woman but present really masculine. They might identify as a man but present really feminine. Whatever it is, you know, you are a cisgender woman. You identify as a straight cisgender woman. Is that correct?
Yes.
So you identify with the sex you was assigned at birth, and that's that. Your sexuality is a completely different thing.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, but some days you might have masculine energy. Some days you might feel more feminine. Some days you might look after your male partner. Some days you might want your male partner to look after you,
Yeah.
you know, in terms of different energies and stuff like this. And people think that gender is biological when really it's just something that society has created and put two different genders on physical characteristics, and now everyone's expected to look and act and dress a certain way.
Yeah.
When what the guy was saying was that people can spend their whole life being intersex and not have a clue because it's not physically visible that you might have part one.
Is it to do with chromosomes and
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
and the
yeah,
way that because I saw a video on this before. It's really difficult to
yeah,
articulate unless you are a science
yeah,
whiz
yeah. Because I don't want to say anything wrong because I'm not.
because you're not a scientist.
Yeah,
Me neither. But I know that there is something to do with chromosomes, and I know that there's like lots of different combinations of genes and chromosomes that can make a difference to whether you
yeah,
feel that, and it's different to the external
yeah. And a lot
presentation.
of it is hormones, which is what he was saying. That's
Yeah.
that's the reason why every man is not 7 foot tall with a massive
Yes.
beard,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and every woman isn't petite and, you know, whatever you would describe as really feminine.
Yeah.
So because everyone is along that spectrum of hormone balances and chromosomes and
Yeah.
whatever else, so it's quite ridiculous to think that the entire population should
Yeah.
fit into two categories of
Yeah.
gender,
Yeah. 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 I
or
totally
otherwise
agree.
everyone would be exactly the same.
Yeah, and it's definitely not like that. And I think I spoke about this earlier, and I spoke about this also in the other podcast. I'm going to speak about it again, which is naked attraction.
Yeah, yeah, I forgot about that.
I'm just a massive fan because I said to you, and I've said it before, if you look at all of the genitalia on show,
Mm,
and they have people from every spectrum, every walk of life, right? There is no holds barred. It is exactly as you would say society is now. And you just look at all the differences in people's bodies. I was talking about boobs, no two sets of boobs are the same. Same with genitalia, vaginas, penises. There's been trans people on as well. So,
yeah.
and I think that you just look and you go, so how does your vagina look like that? How
Mm,
does your penis look like that? And what we're all so very, 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 very different.
yeah.
And, I was saying earlier about some girls really never develop boobs at all. Yet you see them as a girl and
Mm,
they may feel like a girl, but they don't look like what the pictures say they should look
yeah.
like. So this is the point, isn't it? Is that no one fits into that
No.
A, B
Yeah, just
category.
get rid of the box.
Yeah.
Like, it's ridiculous. And we had a conversation before about, I get comments things with people saying, "Well, you're gonna make me a lesbian,"
Yeah.
and I'm like, "You're not you're not a lesbian. Like, you don't look at someone and immediately think, I wonder what their genitalia is like, and that's why I fancy them." You know,
No.
if you've got a connection or that energy with someone, that's all it is. You know, for a straight woman, do I make you feel feminine? Do you feel like I'm masculine? Is that energy around you? Do I make you feel that way? Do you fancy me as a man? Do you feel like, all of that? Everything else goes out the window.
Yeah.
And if anything, it's me who's more insecure throughout the fear of someone thinking they're with a girl when actually that's my own imposter syndrome thinking,
Yes.
this is not okay. But to everybody else, in my experience, that the whole concept of genitalia goes out the window.
Yeah.
Whereas before meeting a trans person and feeling that connection, they would have thought, no, I couldn't,
Yeah.
because your immediate thought is genitalia.
Because you don't know anyone, because no one's having the conversations, no one's being
Exactly. Yeah.
visible.
Yeah.
And the more you see people, the more you realize that you're probably more fluid than you realize yourself.
Yeah. Exactly. And because you can't stop it happening. If
No.
you've got that energy with someone,
You're right.
you're not thinking. If someone met me now and had no idea, and there's that chemistry
Yeah.
between two people,
Yeah.
that's not going to go just because I tell you my experience.
Yeah.
You can fight it all you want, that's fine, but it's not going to go away. And for a lot of people, that opens people's eyes.
Yes.
Because they realize, actually, it doesn't make me a lesbian, or it doesn't make me whatever.
Yeah.
Because it's not about the body part at all.
It's not. And you've done quite a lot of, well, I've seen you do. I don't know if you've done quite a lot, but I've seen a lot of your pictures where you've done some modeling and stuff.
Yeah.
What's been the feedback? And I'm interested actually in that kind of flirty feedback as well that you might have got through Instagram or TikTok. What's been the feedback there?
I mean, I get amazing. I get incredible feedback in that sense. Of course, I get the abuse, but I get a hell of a lot of positivity in terms of TikTok. And half that crowd is women putting fire emojis, and half that crowd is parents thanking me for what I'm doing. So, for me, that's incredible, because all I want to do is help people with their own lives, whether that's people going through a transition or experiencing something difficult in their life. But it's also massively affirming to me that I'm starting to look how I've always wanted to look, and
Yeah.
I'm achieving those dreams and making that happen, and proving that, you know, you can be who you want to be. You just have to be willing to put in the effort, whether that's going to the gym or making that big, huge step with whatever it means.
And that alone, just knowing that, you know, and this will be important for a lot of people to hear, I think, that have gone through what you've gone through, is that, on TikTok you're getting those fire emojis. Because let's face it,
Yeah, I
that is
know.
something you said earlier, like what will relationships look like?
I
Let's
was
be
terrified.
real.
I was terrified. I
But
thought no one would ever want to be in a relationship with me again,
uh, uh,
because I just felt like a freak.
yeah, and now you're like TikTok hot stuff.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that I still don't feel terrified. I still panic when I'm naked sometimes, that whoever I'm with is going to wake up and think I'm with a girl. But
Yeah.
that's my fear.
Yeah.
And people will tell me, like, that's ridiculous. I would never think that. You're a man in every sense of the word.
Yeah.
But for me, obviously, that's dysphoria for me, and I struggle with
Yes.
that. But
Yeah.
that's something that I that's something internally that I am working with, and it's just about keep layering that paint,
Mm.
and building your own confidence, and proving that you are capable of what you're saying you're capable of, and
Yeah.
keep doing the little things, the hard things every day, and just
Yeah.
keep climbing, because the more you layer it, the more you build that confidence, and you don't need anyone else's validation.
So true. And I think what you just said there, I asked you a question earlier about what was the scary stuff still. And I guess that's it, isn't it? It's the
Yeah,
scary stuff is your dysphoria, the
yeah,
stuff that goes on internally. Actually, it's probably less to do with what other people think. Because, like you said, you've got to a place where you're like, oh, I'll just sod
yeah,
off.
no.
It's the
It's
internal.
it's what you think about yourself, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think that's always the scariest thing for
Yeah.
anybody,
Yeah. It
because
is.
that's what people are scared to do. People are scared to sit and feel their own emotions,
Yeah.
and I still struggle with that. I'll always be someone who struggles with anxiety, or struggles with feeling whatever I'm feeling,
Mm.
in terms of, because it affects everything. It affects relationships, affects
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
So there'll always be parts of me that struggles or gets insecure or whatever. It's not about banishing that. It's about building on your own self-love and self-worth, and realizing that if you don't look inside yourself, then you're not going to get anywhere. And I always say, I spent 28 years looking for something, I found it myself.
Yeah. I mean, that's crazy. That's beautiful.
So that's all you can say, really, I think.
It's incredible. And I kind of want to just say at the end of all of this, because there is so much in terms of information that we've spoken about. So, something that we discussed before this was that we're going to have in the coming months. So, depending on when someone's listening to this,
Mm.
it will be either out already or not. And we're going to do a bit of a drive on our social medias, aren't we? We're going to do some courses together, which will cover these subjects that we've spoken about today. Some of it will be about trauma, self abandonment, authenticity. So I kind of want to just let people know that
Yeah.
this year, in a couple of months, that's going to be available, but to sort of look out for social media. So on that note,
If you
what
want me
is
and Ella to change your life, come on down.
this is the prize. But what's your social media so that people can find you? Because I think you should be found.
Oh, my Instagram and my TikTok are Jaxon Feeley, and my podcast is Live Your Truth.
Amazing, which is a phenomenal podcast with Thomas Hartley.
Yeah, I've got a couple of regular co-hosts. I am going to start getting guests on it, hopefully, when I've got the time. But
And Thomas
yeah.
Hartley is a character, isn't he? I love him so much.
Yeah.
He's for some of you, you might recognize his name because he's from Maths UK,
Yeah.
isn't he? And he's certainly a character, and he's hilarious, and he's thought provoking, and he manages to be everything all in one package.
Yeah, he's a beautiful soul.
Yeah, I think
yeah.
your chemistry together is
Oh.
is brilliant.
Yeah, we definitely came into each other's lives at a good time. It was as his program first came on the TV, and I'd seen him a couple of times. He found me on Instagram
Wow.
and commented on, I think, one of my photos, saying,
Didn't you
like,
do a photo shoot together?
yeah, to tackle toxic masculinity. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we did a raunchy photo shoot, because to make people have those conversations. So
Yeah.
although it looked like a gay, sexy photo shoot, obviously, like, I'm a straight man, but we have a friendship that is, we love each other. Like, I think he's brilliant, and I'd do anything for him. And we wanted to highlight the fact that when women are in scary situations or nervous or something, they'll hold each other's hand, or
Yeah.
they'll provide each other that support, like emotional or physical or whatever. Why can't men do that?
Yeah. I love it.
Why can I not hold your hand down the street because you're feeling anxious?
Yeah.
Why can't I do that? Because this is that to me is the definition of toxic masculinity.
Yes.
I'm not against masculinity and feeling that and owning that and the historic feelings of being, having that masculine energy. I'm not against that. What I'm against is men can't cry, men can't feel their emotions, men can't support one another. Men are committing suicide
Yeah.
because of that reason. So
It's the biggest killer in men under 35, isn't it?
yeah. So why can't we have those conversations? And that's what it was, to make people go, oh, what? It's always just Jack's gay now.
Yeah.
No.
Really start the narrative again.
Yeah, because it just makes people go, what? And because it's just a thought, and then it makes people look into it more and go, actually, no, this is it. So yeah, we like causing a bit of
bit of chaos. You said it earlier. You do like.
Oh, I cause chaos once a year. Yeah, I'll have them sat. I'll have them sat around the dining room table again soon, telling them something else.
That should be your middle name. You've got Jaxon Feeley. It should be Jax Chaos Feeley.
I know.
But the best kind of chaos, because it's impacting people's lives. So
I hope so.
It is. I think it's been a phenomenal insight into not just the transition experience, but resilience, discipline, courage, vulnerability, authenticity, the prison life as well, which is interesting to know that for you that has actually been a safe space that's allowed you to be you, contrary to what people might think, and how that service has supported you, but also all of those kind of nuances that, people are talking about them, I guess, but I wanted to have more of this type of conversation with you, because I think those nuances, those tiny things that you said there, about people doing this as a consistent, not a campaign, not a special month, having consistent conversations with each other.
Yeah, just embed those values into society, and that's how we change, one person at a time.
And listen, because I think you're and I will wrap this up now, but I think one of the things that I think is really interesting about you is you're so easy to listen to. You're funny.
Oh, thank you.
And you're sweet and you're humble. And if people come out of this conversation thinking, I still don't like, transgender people or whatever, I'd be massively surprised.
Yeah. Well, like I said to you before, if someone's being not very nice, I can give you the information in the right way without jumping down your throat. And if you then take that away and you change your mindset, then that's amazing. I've changed the mindset. But if you continue to be an asshole, then you're an asshole.
That is the quote of the day.
That is up to you. That's all I can do.
I love it.
But no, I appreciate your kind words. Thank you.
So I'm probably gonna. We'll certainly do some more work together. People will see more of us. There will be stuff available for you to purchase if you are interested in delving into this even further.
And we will get you on my podcast at some point.
Yes, we definitely will. There's no doubt about it. I will be there, and we'll talk all about this podcast. On your podcast, we'll say everything we said. But
I feel bad for not asking you about you.
No, never feel bad about that. I loved this. This is like a gift for me. And you travelled so far to be here that I'm so appreciative of it as well. Like, it was. How long did it take?
Only a couple of hours.
Only a couple of hours.
Yeah.
Well, it's still time out of your day to appreciate it.
Yeah.
And on that note, we shall say to our love.
Thank you. See you in a bit.